Okay, we will move on then to the study session. And there aren't a whole lot of items. Calling Chief Weisman.
So we interviewed two paid call candidates, Jarrett Bradley, and Landon Everett. Both appear to be good fits for paid call, so we'd like to move forward with those two next week.
I'll move to approve hiring of Jared
This is study
Bradley
time.
and,
Study session.
sorry,
Bring it Monday.
yeah, okay, bring it
Okay.
Monday. Public Works,
I have two items this morning. First one is change order 10 with Votes Park on the Hardup Elizabeth Street reconstruction project. The property owner at 305 Hardup had a drainage pipe going out to Hardup. With the change in grade of Hardup, the existing drainage pipe would not work. A new drainage pipe had to be installed through the sidewalk. Votes Park has submitted a proposal $745 to complete the work.
Okay? Bring it.
Next, work will begin fairly soon on the First Street box on the Halls area drainage project. With that, we'll have to close down First Street. Justin suggested, and I think it's a good idea, to put up variable message boards prior to closing First Street to warn the motorists of the crossing. The contractor's putting together a price to furnish and maintain variable message boards. Is this something we'd like to consider? It's gonna have to come about fairly quickly here in order to be effective, so.
Is that out by the high school, Jim?
yes.
Okay.
Are we going to be closing that part down while the railroad's closed down?
No, the railroad
Railroad.
should be completed
They're
by
done
Okay.
here in the next 4 or 5
They-
days, if I
yeah,
remember right.
I know we
They're
said
starting
that.
today and should be open, I think, the end of next week or
Yeah.
first of the following week.
So
10 days at
this
the
will be
most.
after that's done,
Yeah.
okay?
All right, how long do you anticipate that's gonna take, and you're gonna close it in its entirety, correct?
Yeah, it'll have to be completely closed. It'll probably be 2 months.
Will school, or will it be done by the time school is back in session?
The goal is to have it open by the time school. Yeah, it's a
The weather
How good of a goal
cooperates.
is
It's a
that?
contract requirement, but should something happen, I mean, we can't open it until it's ready, but they have a contract requirement to open it up before school starts.
Do we have any idea of the cost of these variable message boards?
Not at this point, they're putting the price together.
Okay,
They're similar to what's out there by the railroad now?
Correct, yeah.
Which I think is good. I mean, my opinion.
Yeah, we're worried a
something that's
little bit
needed.
about the number of people that actually get the press releases, so message will get to the people that regularly travel the route.
How do you detour around that, Jeff? Or is it North High Drive is gonna be one of them?
It'll be Maxwell to Maine. Well, in reality, people find their own way.
Okay.
But the official detour on the railroad is Maxwell, Maine, and Northview, Kansas Avenue. But when we close it for local traffic, people find their own way. We don't typically set up an official detour.
Okay,
I'd say I'd like to see the price on those signs, and I figure if those orange and white barriers are up, they're not going through it anyway, so. But I would like to see the price on the signs.
Oh, we
Sure.
should.
okay, your desire to know the signs and then, or you're willing to have them bring on next Monday with the price and we'll decide up or down?
Yes.
You okay?
Fine, yeah.
Okay, we'll bring it next
Thank
week.
you.
Okay, call on Janetta, review possible cost-cutting measures.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have copies of the updated list. Bear with me here and make sure I get the correct one. There should be 5 there. And During the recent budget presentations last week, I presented an updated list of the concepts for reducing expenses in 2020. This was brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic that the city is faced with and the potential revenue losses that we're looking at for 2020. Those revenue losses are estimated anywhere from $800,000 up to $1.2 million, depending on the extent, and that is the impact to the general fund, which is a tax levy fund. And during the recent budget presentations, I went through this list. There has been some updates since that time, and those updates were based off of input from several department heads. And so I'll just go through the list and really highlight the changes that have been undergone on this list. The first one being a hiring freeze, and those would be positions that had not been offered or accepted as of the date of April 27th, so that was when we put the list together. There has been an additional position added since last week. That was the animal control technician. That was originally a animal control officer, but was reduced to a technician position and had been open since the first of the year through April 2020. So you will see that $12,903 has been identified for the savings of that open position, but you will see down in the actual chart, it's recorded at $18,000 because that's the time that that position was open, plus the change from an animal control officer position down to an actual technician. So I went ahead and recorded it as one savings at $18,332. And then as I went over during the budget presentations, there is savings related to open positions. But if you recall, during the 2019 compensation study discussions, there was a modified step that was approved by the commission for new employees. There was a cost related to that modified step as it was outside of the recommended compensation study. And that column is the column in green. The cost of that to the general fund was $38,531.92. But also during that time, we had budgeted for a 2020 longevity payout that was also recommended during the compensation study. It was budgeted, but it was not approved, nor was it paid out. So that was a line item that could draw against the cost of that step. That was $21,777.30 to the general fund. So the net effect of all three of those different scenarios is in the far right-hand column, and you can see that those numbers in savings as it relates to a positive or negative number determines whether it's a savings or what that department would have to actually come up with as far as expenses budgeted in another line item. So in essence, a cost. But the net effect to the general fund for all of those three different scenarios is $68,016.74. So that was changed since last week when it was presented to the commission. And then you can also see...
Where is the longevity at? I mean, it doesn't show here, but where is that included in?
Well, it's just a net effect. It's budgeted in the personnel services line item of each department's budget.
Yeah.
as it was presented during the compensation study.
Yeah, I know that, but you said that it was budgeted, but we haven't spent it, but it's not showing here as money that we don't spend. That's my only question.
How do you get to total savings estimate column? Are you adding and subtracting?
Does, the longevity is just not included here?
No, it's included, basically that total savings column
Okay,
takes.
okay, I'm okay. I'm sorry I asked that. I can't tell orange or red or whatever color that is.
Did I answer your
I got you,
question?
I got you, I know,
There.
I know.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So those three departments that are listed have personnel costs within each one of those funds. Those funds are outside of the general fund, but it does have implications to those departments' budgets in a positive way. So if there are not further questions. And once again, all of these are just concepts as listed. Some will work for some departments, some wouldn't work for others. So these are just estimates at this point in time.
Janetta, let me ask you a question if I
Okay.
could. Up on the hiring freeze part of it, you heard Kyle this morning say he may need 2 more people. Is that a on or off? Can we do that or not?
Well, the water park is a fund outside of the general fund, and
Okay.
we do not hire those employees for the water park as city employees. They are employees of the rec commission,
Gotcha.
but we do pay a fee to MRC to run those, run that park and pay those wages. So it would be,
Would this
affect-
increase that fee?
It would, well, it would increase the payout of wages. So yes, they are, that would be an additional expense, but they are not our employees.
Okay.
They're not really calculated in any of these for purposes of that.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. They wouldn't be included here because they're not our employees.
Okay, thank you.
The next section, down at the bottom of the page, relates to our seasonal and temporary staffing. And the departments were challenged to try to reduce, at a minimum, 50% up to 100% of the hours worked for the remainder of 2020. You can see that Park, Cemetery, and Golf are the major departments that contain temporary and seasonal staffing. All those departments have talked to the commission and discussed what they would propose to be able to save. Unfortunately, they didn't reach the 50% or the 100%, but there were dramatic reductions in the hours that they're proposing over budget to save in each one of those wage line items. Now, I will note that the golf course, once again, is not in the general fund, so it doesn't have a direct impact. Where the golf course would save the general fund would be in eliminating the last transfer of $25,000 that's budgeted towards the end of the year at $25,000. That's their goal to eliminate that transfer. So they have come up with other measures too, as I'll get further down in how they plan to obtain that goal. Overtime for the remainder of 2020, you see what we had budgeted there, what the remaining budget for 20 as it relates to the overtime line item within the personnel services budget. I have put together a chart that shows, and this once again was done in April, so some time has passed, so these numbers once again were at that point in time. But it does list the different departments, what was budgeted for overtime, what was paid out year to date, and what the remaining budget is. And as you can see, some departments are able to reduce or eliminate overtime for the remainder of the year, some aren't. So this is once again just an estimate based off of what was determined in April as far as a consideration for a concept and reducing expenses. The next bullet is across the board reduction to department's budget of 3 to 5%. Once again, this will vary depending on departments. Some of the smaller departments, this is very difficult to do, as 85 to 90% of departments' budgets are personnel. So the 3 to 5% in some of the smaller departments would be catastrophic to those departments. But there are different ideas that have been proposed by various departments as far as what they can do to help reduce the expenses in their department. You can see, once again, the golf course has a listing of some of the things that they talked about during the budget presentation. He can forego some of this initial year for COVID, but is not something that can be sustained year after year, or it would have definitely an impact on the operations of the golf course. I do want to point out, if you turn to the next page, we had a discussion with John Helmer as he was putting together his 2021 budget, that they are not going to purchase one of the 2 different power load cot mounting systems in 2020. So that was an additional savings of $17,000 in 2020. So like I said, this document continues to be updated as more ideas or cost-saving measures get presented to me. The next one is deferment of purchases that had previously been budgeted in the equipment fund. As you can see, all of those that are listed totaling $357,000 had not been approved, but once again had been budgeted to be spent in 2020, and all of those listed will either be removed or hold off from the purchase of those in 2020. So that doesn't have a direct impact per se on the general fund, other than when we get into the transfer discussion, that does have a direct impact on the savings that would be generated in the general fund. The next bullet, the swimming pool discussion as far as opening for the 2020 season. I think we've heard a lot of pluses and minuses related to safety and finance. I can talk to the finance piece as far as what would be the savings to the general fund, and we budgeted in 2020 $180,000 to be transferred from the general fund into the swimming pool fund, which once again is a standalone fund. All of its revenue either comes from receipts at the swimming pool or from the appropriation or transfer that the city makes from the general fund into that fund, which historically has been either years back $160,000 and now has recently been increased to $180,000. $60,000 of that has already been made this year. But there's various potential savings that could be generated from either ceasing that transfer the rest of 2020, depending on what the commission decides on whether opening that or not. I will just say that there is a healthy cash balance in that fund, as I indicated during the 2021 budget presentation. But the cash balance was not only established for the normal operations of the water park, but also for potential capital as that water park starts to age, the infrastructure costs continue to increase, and so that's what could be hindered by not continuing the budgeted appropriation. The next section would be training and canceling non-essential training as it relates to the remainder of 2020 budget. Similar to what I did for overtime, I listed those departments in the general fund, what had been budgeted for training expense line item, what had been spent year to date, and what the remaining budget authority is in each one of those departments. And once again, this could vary depending on the department, as we've talked about with the police and fire, have statutorily obligated training that they must do to maintain their certifications. But that's definitely an area in some of the departments that could be saved as it relates to non-essential training. As I talked about before with the swimming pool, the next section has to do with budgeted transfers from the general fund to the various standalone funds that we make each and every year. I have already mentioned it again, but the golf course goal is to try to eliminate that last half transfer of $25,000 and the different activities or operational cuts that they are working on to eliminate that. Wastewater, we budget each year $80,000 transferred into that fund, or into the general fund from wastewater. Jeff has indicated that we could increase that for 1 year, anywhere from $28,000 up to $44,000. So that would be additional revenue into the general fund outside, out of the wastewater fund. And then you can see the other different transfers that could be either cut or eliminated. I've talked about up above the different capital expenses for equipment that have been either removed or held off. So the general to equipment could either be cut or eliminated or reduced. And then once again, the swimming pool, I already talked about that. And then also the municipal building has a standalone fund. Each year we budget $90,000 to go into that fund. That could be reduced or eliminated, as well as the general to consolidated streets. That transfer has already been made, but there's definitely some implications to not making that transfer, and then also that consolidated streets transfers money into the equipment fund for their capital processes. So if, as far as the cash balance that would be in the equipment fund, if the transfers were not made, would take that fund down to $574,258. If we eliminated the equipment purchase that we talked about above for 2020, that cash balance in that fund would be $916,258, which is significant over that proposed cash balance amount. The next bullet point, each year the outside agencies come in and talk and request money from the city, which gets paid out of the general fund. As you can see, those different outside agencies, the amount that was budgeted in 2020 to those agencies, that would have painful cuts to their businesses, and in some cases would have result in an elimination of positions, but that is an option.
Have these been paid? This year?
I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
At least a portion of it has been partially.
Yeah.
Some of it has.
Yeah, I think that's done biannually, so if anything, half would have been paid already. But I'll definitely take a look at that and see. The next item was something that was added to either pause or reduce or hold off until future years where we could afford to pay out to these programs, but it's the RCAP and NCHIP. RCAP is a relocation program where we pay out $2,000 to go towards moving expenses. And then the NCHIP is for those people that are buying newly constructed homes and helps pay with reduction in those special assessments they have to pay. So what I did was just add a history of what has been paid in NCHIP since the development of that program back in 2013, and the same for the RCAP program that started in 2018. And then revenue considerations is really one of the last bullet points. As I had reported for 2019, unaudited ending cash balance, the general fund beginning cash balance for 2020 had a additional carryover amount of $482,893. Once again, this is unaudited, but that would be cash that the commission could use for reducing or paying for additional expenses. And then request additional funding for 2020. Each year we get an appropriation for electricity and water from the BPU. And then lastly, in 2020 we budgeted $3.2 million in the general fund for as a reserve for loss and contingency due to any sort of emergency. And so that $3.2 million could be used towards cutting expenses. Any questions or comments? This is just an updated list based off of what we went over last Tuesday, a week ago today.
We can go today, yeah.
Okay, any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you for this. We're going to come back to it in the
Okay.
commission.
Can I just remind the commission that tomorrow is the 2021 budget presentations from the outside agencies, and that will be over in the community building tomorrow. And I just wanted to remind you to bring
8 o'clock?
bring your budget books, as each one of those agencies have put in there some significant information on their organization, their goals, their financials, and their budget requests. The only one that's not in your book that I have to hand out tomorrow is from the hospital for EMS.
Sure.
So, yes, tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and if you have any questions on any of that, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.
Okay. Is there anything else in the study session? Okay, the study session is over.